ලසනකාන්තී චූර්ණය සහිත ලීවර් ආයුෂ් දන්තාලේපය දත්වල ඇති ප්‍රශ්න 10ක් වළකයි.
Tonight, total standstill. Sri Lanka grinds to a complete halt with the island-wide strike coming into effect today. Immediate action. Former Premier Ranil Wickremesinghe warns of an imminent collapse of state banks if fuel and power prices aren't raised. To the letter, all eyes are on the IGP to act on the Kegol court order, but he says no order has been received yet. The tiger by the tail. Cybersecurity expert warns that inviting anonymous to hack Sri Lanka may be more trouble than it's worth.
Behind them, there are always criminalistic elements. People who are in here to attack websites or organizations or individuals, harvest their data and sell it online.
All this and much more coming up tonight on First at 9, this Thursday the 28th of April 2022.
Life boy shampoo cuti rupiah 70.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Bringing you the latest from across the island, this is First at 9 and I'm David Ebert. Now, cybersecurity experts are voicing serious concerns over the safety of personal information belonging to Sri Lanka's population and those of corporates as well, following recent attacks on government websites by members of hacktivist group Anonymous. The action by Anonymous comes after Sri Lankans issued calls for the group to support the ongoing public protests against the government. However, cybersecurity consultant Asela Vaidyalanka warns that Sri Lanka needs to understand the true face of Anonymous, a group made up of amateur and expert hackers with some clearly possessing criminal intent. Speaking to Indivari Amuwata on our current affairs program at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24 today, Vaidyalanka warned that the group's recent leak of Foreign Employment Bureau data was the best example of what Sri Lankans can expect from it. The Sri Lankan Twitter space has been divided since calls were issued by some social media users to hacktivist group Anonymous to help Sri Lanka's protests by exposing members of the government. The response from the group has been somewhat way off the mark from what was expected by the protesters, targeting some government sites such as the Police Department website, the Ratnapura Municipal Council and the Department of Immigration, rendering the sites inaccessible. However, other actions of the group have raised serious concerns by cybersecurity experts who warn that a hidden agenda exists, where criminal elements may pose a major threat to the personal information of Sri Lankans, including most of the protesters themselves. Cybersecurity consultant Asela Vaidyalanka says that Sri Lankans should be more careful what they wish for.
There was a very organic protest movement for the hardships and the shortages in the country. Somewhere around late March, the last week of March, there was an online chatter or a conversation in social media to bring Anonymous, and Anonymous can save us. Now, this is a fairly misguided concept because I feel they misunderstood what Anonymous does. Perhaps, added to that, they misunderstood what WikiLeaks does, and maybe mishmashed the both in and thought that these guys can go after the leadership, then can expose financial misappropriation, sort of like a criminal justice kind of role they would play. And this conversation gained momentum. Somewhere in the first week of April, we saw that solidify as a hashtag, Anonymous Save Sri Lanka. So this hashtag started to gain traction. And what happened was, because of the traction it gained, it actually got attention from Anonymous. The actual Anonymous, because you must understand it's a distributed network. There are local members also of it who started to lobby the wider Anonymous collective that this is happening in Sri Lanka and step in. But what you must understand is the composition of Anonymous is varied.
So why is it so dangerous for Sri Lanka?
Good point, and I'm coming to that. Why is it dangerous? Because the composition. The composition is hackers, black hats, criminalistic elements, or people who are doing this, who've just learned how to do certain disruptions and want to prove it at a stage, wider stage. So these are some of the personalities that are in Anonymous. Now, We call the first type, the last type of people called script kiddies. These are guys who have just learned how to do hacking and they want to do it in a wider stage. These are the guys taking the lead. These are the guys maybe doing the disruption in the websites because they are very basic hacks. But behind them, there are always criminalistic elements. People who are in here to attack websites or organizations or individuals, harvest their data and sell it online. So there's an entire criminal ecosystem that comes along with Anonymous, unfortunately. And that is what the danger is. The first day that this supposed attack, April 20th, the Sri Lanka Foreign Employment Bureau, there was a leak of information. And that information can be sold in the dark web because there's identifiable physical addresses, there's mobile phone numbers, and there's email addresses. And although it might not look important, that actually has monetary value in the dark web. And when you do that, all of those individuals are at risk. So this is the kind of flavor of risks that we have got in. So what we've done here is, if our risk was moderate before calling on Anonymous, our risk signature has now.
Vaidulankara also added that the job of exposing state corruption should be left to the experts, namely investigative journalists and not hackers.
Why Anonymous? Isn't there any other way we could really investigate into these misappropriations and expose transactions of our leadership?
There is investigative journalists, and they've done a brilliant job of it for so many years. Frankly, it's an insult to them and their body of work to ask for a nameless, faceless hacking group to come and do this. Because they've not done this, and they're not capable of doing this.
An island-wide token strike was carried out by hundreds of trade unions across many sectors such as health, education and transport today, effectively bringing the country to a grinding halt. However, a clear message has been delivered to the government. With public transport hampered and government offices not in operation today, members of the public, however, were once again forced to bear the brunt.
A mass token strike was held today by members of the trade unions across multiple sectors under the theme, "Bow your head to the will of the people, the government must go home." Many trade unions of multiple sectors including transport, health, education, electricity, water supply, postal, banking, Samurdhi and estate workers carried out the strike in various parts of the island. Due to the protest, the public travelling to their places of employment using public transport was severely inconvenienced. This was because only 50% of the usual capacity of private buses were in operation today, with the Sri Lanka Transport Board having to make up for the lack of buses. The situation was, however, worse for those who use train services. Even though the Railways Department announced yesterday that train services will take place unhindered today, the reality was far from it. Many people who had believed the reassurances of the department were inconvenienced today after arriving at the train stations, as the lack of employees at the station meant they were not getting to their destinations. Further, others who had travelled to government institutions hoping to get specialised services, despite the transportation difficulties, were left with nothing but disappointment. Many of the institutions did not function due to staff members engaging in the token strike today. Some of these government institutions were the Department of Registration of Persons, Department of Immigration and all post offices. Meanwhile, as teachers and principals took part in the token strike today, many schools were closed. Due to the lack of teachers, many students left the school premises soon after arriving. In the meantime, employees at many major hospitals also expressed support for the strike today. Staff at hospitals took part in the strike for 2 hours today, starting from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. Despite the token strike, fuel transportation and airport services were carried out unhindered today.
Meanwhile, the protests at Goreface Green entered its 20th day today with no signs of the protesters intending to give up their struggle until they receive some semblance of a response to their demands for the president and the government to resign. Meanwhile, many other protests inspired by the peaceful dissent at Goldface Green have been taking place across the country as well.
Public frustrations don't seem to be dying down by any measure, with no visible improvement in the current economic situation. This continues to draw thousands of people from all walks of life to the Goldface Green to voice their displeasure at the government. As such, it has been 20 days since the protests at the Goldface Green got underway, where a single demand has echoed, that is for the president and the government to resign. As seen before, the lengths that people are willing to go to voice their agitations are seen by how they relentlessly protest at the site despite the heavy rains. Meanwhile, similar to the Goldface Green protests, the protest village that was set up in front of the Prime Minister's office at Temple Trees has also gathered traction. The Premier's recent comments on whether he plans to heed the continuous calls for his resignation has seen more people turning up at his doorstep. In the meantime, other protests inspired by the Goldface Green protest are currently being worked off in Galle and Matra as well. In other developments, farmers from the areas of Giritale launched a protest in front of the residence of State Minister of Mahaweli, Siripala Gamlath, demanding his resignation as well. The farmers have continuously staged the protest for 3 days.
Now, opposition leader Sajith Premadasa said today that his party will not form an interim government with the Rajapaksa family, given that the present situation was brought about by their own doing. He made these comments during the third consecutive day of the Samagi Jana Balawegaya protest march, which began in Kandy.
For the third consecutive day, the main opposition Samagi Jana Balawegaya carried out their protest today from Kandy. The SJB launched a protest march on the 26th of this month against what they say is an anarchic state the country has fallen into due to the dysfunctional rule. The protest march was initiated today from the area of Galigamu in Kandy by leader of the opposition, Sajith Premadasa.
මේ සජිත් ප්‍රේමදාසව මගේ පක්ෂයේ කිසිම කෙනෙක් එක්ක කොටවන්න කාටවත් බෑ. මාස 30ක් ඇතුළත මේ රාජපක්ෂ පවුල මේ රට බංකොලොත් කරා. අපේ රට බංකොලොත් උනේ මේ රටේ ජාතික ධනය හොරා කාපු නිසා. අද අපිට කියනවා අන්තර්වාර පාලන ආණ්ඩුවකට සම්බන්ධ වෙන්න කියලා. තමුන්නාන්සලා කැමතිද? කැමතිද? මෙන්න ජනමතය දැන් යනෝ විකඩ නාඩගම ජනාධිපතිවරයා කියනවා ආගමැති අයියේ ගෙදර යන්න ආගමැතිවරයා කියනවා ජනාධිපති මල්ලිය කවදාවත් මට යන්න කියන්නේ නැහැ මේ විහිළු නාඩගම යනකොට මහ පාරේ ජනතාව දුක් විඳිනවා.
Meanwhile, the march will commence from Dannovitu tomorrow and proceed to Yakkala. The march is also scheduled to make its way to Colombo on the 1st of May under the theme Struggle for Independence and May Rally of the Century.
And we'll be back with more local news right after this short break. Do stay with us.
Big 3.
Welcome back. Now, all eyes are on the Inspector General of Police at present to see how he proceeds with yesterday's order by the Kegol magistrate to arrest all police personnel involved in the shooting of protesters during the Ramukana public protests. However, police spokesman SSP Nihan Talduwa stated today that the IGP is yet to receive the court order and until then, no action will be taken. Yesterday, Kegol Magistrate Vasana Navaratna issued an order to the Inspector General of Police to take immediate steps to arrest and produce in court all police personnel involved in ordering and opening fire on protesters in Rambukkana that led to the death of one individual. The magistrate's order was hailed by the public as a very just move. However, today police spokesman SSP Nihal Talduwa says that the IGP has not received the court order and hence no arrests can be made. He added that action will be taken only once the court order is officially received. A total of 29 protesters received gunshot injuries during the protests in Rambukkana town after fuel prices at Sipetco filling stations were raised overnight. The protesters demanded that the fuel in the storage tanks at the town's filling station be sold to them at all prices, as it had been supplied at previous wholesale prices. However, the situation became tense when this did not come about, leading to local residents taking to the streets. The court order was issued by the Kegol magistrate after the judicial medical examiner reported that the protester Chaminda Lakshan died of a hemorrhage from serious internal organ damage caused by a bullet. The police meanwhile have claimed that they only fired into the air and then aimed below the knees of the protesters. Now, United National Party leader Ranil Wickremesinghe says that fuel and power unit prices will need to be raised in order to ease the pressure on state banks that are currently under immense pressure after bankrolling the CB and the CPC. He warns that the stability of the People's Bank and the Bank of Ceylon are at risk of failure due to the undue burden of the billions in loans handed out to state entities.
අපේ ආර්ථික අර්බුදය තුළ සංකීර්ණ ප්‍රශ්න ගණනාවක් තිබෙනවා. ඩොලර් හිඟය, ආදායම් අඩුවීම, වියදම් වැඩිවීම, දරා ගන්න බැරි ණයක් තමයි මේකට තියෙන ප්‍රධාන කාරණා. මේ දරා ගන්න බැරි ණයට ඇතුළත් වෙන කරුණු කීපයක් තියෙනවා. ඉන් ප්‍රධාන එක තමයි මේ රටේ සංස්ථා ණය බර. අපි අරගත්තොත් ලංකා විදුලි බල මණ්ඩලය ඇමතුමා ගිය සුමානේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ කරපු ප්‍රකාශයක් අනුව 2021 දී බිලියන 79ක පාඩුවක් ලබා ගත්තා කියලා කියනවා. සමහර අය කියනවා පාඩුව මීට වඩා වැඩි. මේ අවුරුද්දට බිලියන 100ක පාඩුවක් ලැබෙන බවත් ප්‍රකාශ කරා. ඒ වගේම එක විදුලි බල ඒකකයක් සඳහා අය කරන්නේ රුපියල් 17යි. ඒත් වියදම රුපියල් 53ක් කියලා. අපි තෙල් සංස්ථාව දිහා බලනවා නම් 2021 දී විශේෂයෙන්ම අලාභය රුපියල් බිලියන 83යි. දැන් කියන කිව්වේ කාරණා අනුව ඇමතුමා කියන්නේ එක දවසකට රුපියල් බිලියනයක පාඩු ලැබුවා කියලා. මේ මිල වැඩි කිරීමෙන් පස්සෙත් තවත් දවසකට මිලියන 327ක පාඩුවක් ඒ කියන්නේ ඊළඟ මාස කීපය තුලදී අවුරුදු දවසක් වෙනකොට තව බිලියන 80ක පමණ පාඩුවක් ඇති වෙන්න යනවා. ඉතින් මේ ණය දීලා තියෙන්නේ ලංකා බැංකුවත් මහජන බැංකුවත්. මීට අමතරව මේ බැංකු දෙකට ශ්‍රී ලංකා ගුවන් සේවයේ ණය දරා ගන්නට සිදු වෙනවා. මේ සමහර විදේශ ණය සහතික කළා තියෙනවා. මීට අමතරව අනික් සංස්ථා ණය තියෙනවා. මේ ණය සියල්ලම ගත්තොත් තවත් ණය දෙනවා නම් ණය බර වැඩි වුණොත් එහෙනම් බැංකුවේ පැවැත්ම ගැන ප්‍රශ්නයක් ඇති වෙන්න පුළුවන්. තවත් විදුලි බල මණ්ඩලයේ අලාභ අඩු කරන්න නම් එහෙනම් මිල වැඩි කරන්න තියෙනවා. ඒ වගේම තෙල් සංස්ථාවේ අලාභ අඩු කරන්න නම් එහෙනම් මිල වැඩි කරන්න තියෙනවා. මේ රුපියල බාල්දු වෙන නිසා ඒ මිල තවත් වැඩි වෙනවා. මේ සියල්ලම ඇත්ත වශයෙන්ම දරා ගන්න තියෙන්නේ මේ රටේ ජනතාවට.
The Consumer Affairs Authority issued a gazette yesterday making it mandatory for all manufacturers and others involved in the distribution of goods to possess accurate documentation on the goods that are currently in their possession.
An extraordinary gazette was issued by the chairman of the Consumer Affairs Authority, retired Major General Shanta Dissanayake, making it mandatory for manufacturers, sellers and many others involved in the distribution process to have some sort of proof detailing the goods in their possession. According to the gazette, all manufacturers, producers, store owners, suppliers, distributors or traders shall have a receipt or bill or invoice in writing or printing or electronic for the goods in their possession, custody or under their control. However, it goes on to say that anyone without such proof shall not sell, store, collect, distribute, expose or offer for sale, display for sale, unless they have the following information in the form of a receipt or bill or invoice for the goods they have purchased, issued by the manufacturer, producer, store owner, supplier, distributor or trader, stored in a container, warehouse, silo, place of business or any other places. As such, all those mentioned in the Gazette must comply with the new rules that went into effect from yesterday.
Department of Meteorology today issued an amber alert weather advisory warning of thunder showers accompanied by severe lightning across several areas across the island. The department has also warned the general public to take adequate precautions to minimize damage caused by temporarily localized strong winds and lightning during the downpours.
The Department of Meteorology issued a weather advisory warning of thunder showers accompanied by severe lightning conditions that are likely to occur at several places in the western, central, Sabaragamuwa, Uva, north central and northwestern provinces and in the Mullaitivu and Vaunia districts. It added that heavy showers above 100 mm may occur at some places in these areas, while fairly heavy showers above 50 mm can occur at some places elsewhere as well. The department also warned the general public to take adequate precautions to minimize damages caused by temporary localized winds. The department also warned the general public to take adequate precautions to minimize damages caused by temporary localized strong winds and lightning during the downpours. Further, showers or thunder showers are expected to occur at several places in the sea areas of the coastline, extending from Mana to Potuville, via Puttala and Colombo, Galle and Hambantota. It added that winds will be southwestern or variable in direction with speeds between 20 to 30 km per hour. Wind speeds could also increase up to 35 to 40 km per hour at times in the sea areas off the coast, extending from Colombo to Kankasanthore via Puttalam, it stated. Meanwhile, the department also warned of temporary strong gusty winds and very rough seas as well.
Welcome back. China is facing its worst COVID-19 outbreak since the peak of the first wave in early 2020, with eastern Shanghai recording dozens of daily deaths and the capital Beijing sealing off whole neighborhoods where handfuls of cases have been detected.
The National Health Commission of China announced today that the Chinese mainland has reported 1,503 new locally transmitted COVID-19 cases and 9,864 local asymptomatic cases, marking a total of 11,367 cases. More than 10,000 of China's cases were detected in Shanghai, including a total of 47 new deaths, where the cases are trending downwards after a weeks-long lockdown, which has enraged residents and seen rare protests against government accused of bungling the response and failing to feed people confined at home. Meanwhile, a total of 9 new imported COVID-19 cases were reported on the Chinese mainland yesterday, with 3 in Sichuan, 2 in Fujian, 1 each in Beijing, Taijin, Jiangxi and Guangdong. Further, the number of severe cases increased by 81 compared with the previous day. By the end of yesterday, the accumulative number of confirmed COVID-19 cases on the mainland reached 208,584, including 25,506 still receiving treatment and 399 still in severe condition. Altogether, 178,155 patients have recovered and been discharged from hospitals. 4,923 deaths have been reported, the Commission said. However, throughout the pandemic, China has stuck to a strict zero-COVID strategy that uses lockdowns, mass testing, quarantines and border closures to contain the virus. But the arrival of the highly infectious Omicron variant has thrown the sustainability of that strategy into question, with the virus spreading into different cities and provinces faster than the government can contain it. Authorities have now enforced full or partial lockdowns in at least 27 cities across the country, with these restrictions affecting up to 165 million people, according to foreign media reports. Shanghai, which has recorded more than 500,000 cases since the 1st of March, introduced a staggered lockdown later in the month, which expanded into a full citywide lockdown by the end of the month. Meanwhile, the Shanghai authorities yesterday announced that some neighborhoods can start to ease lockdown measures if they have reported no cases in the past 2 weeks.
Now, Sri Lanka received the first delivery of 3.1 tons of humanitarian aid from the government of Indonesia today. Another flight is set to arrive on the 8th of next month with the remainder of the medicines and medical equipment that was requested by the Ministry of Health. The aid shipment is worth a total of $1.6 million.
The government of Indonesia has approved humanitarian aid worth $1.6 million for Sri Lanka in response to the severe hardships faced by the country at present. In a media communique issued yesterday, the Indonesian embassy in Colombo confirmed that humanitarian aid, including essential medicines and medical equipment valued at 517.5 million rupees and weighing 3.1 tons, will arrive on 2 flights. According to the embassy statement, after receiving a request from the Ministries of Foreign Affairs and Health in Sri Lanka, Indonesia's Ministry of Health took steps to immediately coordinate with the related Indonesian ministries and pharmaceutical manufacturers to get the donation ready. Indonesia's ambassador in Sri Lanka, Dewi Gustina Tobing, in her statement said that the quick response from all stakeholders in Indonesia showed the thoughtfulness towards Sri Lanka and their understanding of the urgency of the said essential medicines and medical equipment. Accordingly, the first flight arrived today and was officially handed over to Health Minister Dr. Chanajai Sumana by Ambassador Tobing at the Bandar Naika International Airport.
We will send all these medicines and equipments tomorrow to the cancer hospital and other cancer management centers for the management of these patients. This is very rapid response from your end. So I would like to again thank Excellency for your excellent work for getting this consignment to Sri Lanka as early as possible.
I'm here today with the Minister to hand over the Indonesian humanitarian aid, the assistance to our dear Sri Lanka in order to help to give the assistance on medicine and medical appliances that needed really urgently by Sri Lanka at this time. After we received the request on this donation, directly my institution in Indonesia work together and then cooperate with all stakeholders at the government level as well as the level of the manufacturer in Indonesia, and they do a very rapid coordination in order to collect all the necessary that Indonesia could contribute to Sri Lanka.
And that's all the news we have for you tonight. We hope you join us again tomorrow at the same time. Good night.